Let me introduce our first panelist, Kim Kimpassi, whom most of you know already. For those of you who don't, Kim has been working in auto retail industry and with B2B integrations for most of her career. She co-founded Motive Retail over a decade ago and has been working tirelessly to improve the integration processes and to enable higher quality data exchanges in auto retail operations. Any of you who know her well can attest that Kim is passionate about solving the challenges that OEMs and integrating parties have endured in the past. With that, Kim, I'll hand it over and I'll let you introduce Stefan.
Great. Thanks, Natalie, and good morning, everybody. I forgot a little bit about what that all said, and the tirelessly, or maybe just the tired bit, struck a nerve immediately. But it's so good to be doing this today. Welcome to our customers, our partners, our friends. I hope that you guys will find value from this. And as Natalie said, it's our intent to do more of these, and you know, we'll look for some feedback from you as we wrap this one up and in the coming weeks, so that we can make sure that you know, we're providing the kind of content that's valuable, and hopefully initiating the kind of discussion that I think is super critical for us at this point in the industry and in the market. As we go through, you know, the pace of change and innovation that we're all seeing. So Stefan, let me introduce him. We're delighted to have him with us today. Some of you may know him. He is the founder of Dealer Tech Nerd, a man after our own heart. And his mission is to provide really superior market intelligence for anyone who is exploring dealership technology. So for about 10 years, Stefan's been guiding dealers through the negotiations of dealership technology and assisting them in navigating through the complex world of dealer tech. So a great breadth and depth of experience in this space. National Automotive Dealer Association has invited him to author the Dealer Guide to Automotive CRM, and co-present a webinar on digital retail and online sales. Automotive News has featured Stefan on topics around DMS and third-party integration, and he's a regular speaker at ADAs, 20 groups, and other events. So welcome, Stefan, and we'll turn it over to you, and let's get started.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Natalie. I really appreciate the opportunity and being here, so thanks for having me. Maybe just to kind of add some color on my background, really what you see on that slide here, specifically on the left side, I spend a lot of time on specifically franchise car dealers and helping them through their DMS negotiations. And what that means really is, here in the US and in Canada, for many, many years, specifically over the last 5 to 15 years, as a franchise car dealer, you only really had 2 DMS choices: ADP Employer Services and Reynolds and Reynolds. And naturally, within oligopoly, you know, you have vendors trying to take advantage of their user base, their client base, and in this case, franchise car dealers. So they took advantage of franchise dealers with regards to pricing, contractual terms, the degree of innovation in their software product. So car dealers needed, unfortunately, someone like me in their corner to help them and really cut through the vapor and really understand fair market pricing for technology, understanding contractually, contractual obligations to better understand, what products work and what don't. So I spend a lot of times with car dealers, really, walking them through that selection process and that guidance, and ultimately the negotiations through that. The franchised car dealer body in the US and Canada is somewhat unique in comparison to Europe and even with regards to Asia, right? So franchise car dealers here on that side of the pond are truly independent retailers that make their own decisions on people, processes, decisions, obviously guided under an OEM agreement, but yet really independent in that regard. So we have fairly strong franchise laws here. And When you look at the total addressable market for those DMS providers here on the left side, then you can say that we are roughly 20,000 strong. You know, there are 16,682 dealers here in the US. There are 3,000 additional dealers in Canada under franchise agreements. And those dealers specifically here in the US, they spend roughly $30,000 per month on software. And a big portion of that IT spend comes from the DMS side of things. Besides the DMS, on average, franchise dealers have 10 to 15 additional bolt-ons that sit on top of the DMS. So think of customer relationship management systems, applications that facilitate the service experience, inventory analytics, and many more. So we'll spend some time on those applications here as well today. But yeah, that's really my playground. You know, the vendors you see on the left side, outside of franchise car dealers and their DMS systems, naturally you have adjacent categories. Think of truck, power sport, RVs. So a lot of the vendors that you see here in the middle of that slide, they are serving those dealers. And naturally, the world in Europe and Asia and elsewhere looks very different because we don't really have the SAPs and the Oracles and the Microsoft Dynamics really in that market. You know, a lot of that is driven really with proprietary systems. So yeah, I hope that adds more color really on my background and how I really fit into this space. What is so interesting with regards to DMS providers here is that the rate of adoption for a dealership management system or an ERP-like application is 100%, right? Every franchise car dealer in the US and Canada has a DMS to process OEM information specifically, right? So think of VIN numbers, parts masters, the ability to transmit financial or submit financial statements, warranty claims, process internet leads, and many other things. So therefore, for a DMS to really grow in a very mature market, a lot of that runs through what we call layered applications. So DMS providers primarily grow through adding more features and functionality and penetrate the dealer market through them, right? Again, service applications, inventory applications, CRM-like applications, and more. Just to you know, kind of push the pause button here, maybe here. Natalie, do we have a poll on that slide?
We certainly can launch it. We were going to launch on the next one, but let's go ahead and do it. So I'm going to launch a poll here, and we'll give you just a minute. And again, just as a reminder, this is anonymous, so don't worry about your answers. And so you should all see a window now pop up, and just go ahead and take a second, read the question and the multiple choice answers. You can select multiple. We'll give you a minute, and then we'll share the results back out with the group.
Budget. What a surprise that would have the most popular vote here. I mean, look, there are, what do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different possible categories from a multiple choice perspective. And for those of you that have been in this business and around DMS integration, I'm sure you could probably come up with another 8 or 10 or more reasons, you know, in terms of challenges, but budget, you know, is an obvious one. The others that is interesting here: incomplete data and lack of, or at least efficient partner technology. And I think as we go forward here, and Stefan will talk a little bit more about this, we see that changing, particularly on the technology side. And as that does, I think, you know, the ability for capturing, you know, data sets that aren't currently or haven't historically been captured, hopefully start to solve some of that problem around, you know, around the limitations on the data set. Interesting, nobody, it looks like, chose kind of the lack of knowledge or skill sets. So, so that's good. Anyway, we'll share this back out and keep moving along.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, same for me. There was no surprises there. So good poll. To give you a little bit more background on how DMS systems have evolved over the last 5 years specifically is that we really, departed the stage of, just having integrated specifically legacy DMS systems, and we are primarily looking at, platforms or ecosystems. I just mentioned that, we have fairly limited growth opportunities for DMS providers. So therefore, every DMS provider is somewhat interested in adding more features and functionality just to, keep growing. Therefore, naturally, most of the DMS providers in our markets follow a platform approach. And platform really in a sense of that you add those layered applications and you primarily, market to your dealer body with value propositions like, having unified data, having single sign-ons, better workflow and user experience. And in many cases, really remove those third-party integration fees. So there was some developments over the last years where some DMS providers monetized on integrating with other dealership software and service providers. So therefore, as a DMS provider, if you can add features and functionality and have your dealers choose you over those bolt-ons, then you don't need those third-party integration fees. Besides DMS platforms, we also have some vendors that really follow more of an ecosystem approach. So I think the poster child here in the US is someone like Cox Automotive. We have a dealer track DMS, but layered applications are really provided from other providers within your house of brands, right? Inventory comes from someone called vAuto, service applications come from Xtime, CRM and sales applications come from Vin Solutions. The main differentiator here between platform and ecosystem is really that within a platform, most of these platforms, if not all, are really closed platforms. So think of CDK and think of CDK service application that can only run on dealers that have the CDK DMS. Or the Reynolds and Reynolds DocuPad F&I solution only runs on a Reynolds and Reynolds DMS. And the same applies to the PBS business intelligence tool, the dealer build service application, the Techion zero contact sales and service applications. Those layered apps only work if dealers already bought into the underlying DMS. While on the right side, with regards to that ecosystem approach, these applications are agnostic. A dealer socket CRM can run on any DMS. Inventory Plus can run on any DMS. A Dominion activator can run on any DMS. For our partners in Canada, Quorum and its DealerMine CRM or Autovans F&I, they can run on CDK, they can run on Reynolds and Reynolds. So these are really agnostic applications and therefore more open towards where they can pull information off and push back. Last point, just to finish off this slide, is what we see here on the right side, marketplaces. So there's some early developments or attempts bringing developers, dealers, even OEMs to kind of together and offer applications and maybe co-create some of those applications. But we see that on a very smaller scale. So mainly DMS platforms and dealer tech ecosystems at this point. What is really interesting from our perspective, besides really this evolution from legacy DMS to platforms and ecosystem, is also that recently we are seeing developments of recoding, where DMS providers really take a deeper look under the hood and trying to move their tech stack to the next generation. So you're probably familiar with some of those providers here, as you probably have to recertify them for your OEM interfaces. But you have applications that are still sitting on on-site servers that require multiple logins, that have good drill down capabilities, but many keystrokes, potentially multiple databases, because when you acquire a company, then it takes a while to merge those databases together. To a certain degree, have a dated approach to data integration because they still run on ADF XML, right, or file sharing and who knows what. But in general, those DMS systems, they really provide and support traditional retail management use cases. And that's a challenge because the industry overall is moving towards redefining of what is automotive retail in 5 to 10 years, and not just the retail side of things, but the OEM side of things as well. Therefore, when you look at mobility and you look at telematics, vehicle information, predictive analytics, and all these kind of things, they are not really data fields for all those elements in a traditional legacy DMS. So a lot of these DMS systems, they had to reinvent themselves as well to support new use cases. So therefore, naturally, you have quite a few of them recoding, right? Autosoft, the traditional system was Flex DMS. They're coming out with a new platform called Go. Drive with CDK, they have been working on this for roughly 2 years now here, specifically in the US and Canada, on releasing Drive Flex, not just to dealers on the lower end, but really to release that platform to all their strategic accounts as well. Dominion Access is moving to Dominion View, which is a cloud-native DMS. PBS moved from Aristo to V10, and then also a provider that gets a lot of attention here in the US specifically, Techion, with its automotive retail cloud or ARC system. So again, those are primarily cloud-native systems. They really boost dealership management system user experience as well. So a lot of that value proposition is better workflow, automations, mobility, to really simplify not just using the system, but also learnability. For many years, car dealers in the US, they have been plagued with very high labor turnover rates. So on average, a franchise car dealer has a labor turnover of 46% annually. When you look at certain departments, they can be even higher. So when you look at a franchise car dealer in the sales department, 80% labor turnover on average. So that means that if you have 13, 14, 15 sales associates, then you burn through 10 of them at least every year. So therefore, having applications that really make it easy to use, easy to jump in, that is a really powerful value proposition here. But that's really, and just to give you some flavor and some background on how these platforms are moving, not just from legacy DMS to platforms, but then also how do they move from an old tech stack to next generation tech stack. All those applications that you can see here and the slide before, really, again, they try to grow primarily through those layered applications. And this is one of my key missions at Dealer Tech Nerd, really trying to provide a taxonomy for the industry, simply because there is DMS and so much more. And on average, there are roughly 40 categories right now, including DMS, but CRM, websites, and so many others. And from my perspective, there are more than 800 vendors that play in this arena. So this is a very, very busy and fragmented market with a very long tail. So the way I contextually put these providers together is really within value pools. So there are 40 categories, and I looked at all those 40 categories, the vendors that are sitting in those categories, and put them contextually in these value pools. And this is really what I came up with. When you look at the left corner here, then starting there at the top, you see online showroom. So you have applications that circle around online and content management, websites, but also social reputation management. You have marketplaces and classifieds. You have providers that offer digital advertising, digital marketing, ad tech kind of falls under this. But this is really online showroom. Then something that is really evolving here right now in the US is this whole aspect of vehicle transactions, specifically online sales and digital retail. That is then that second bucket that you can see in the first row there. That includes applications for digital retail and online sales, but also payment calculation, desking, F&I menu recommendations and presentation, digital and e-contracting, buy here, pay here, lease here, pay here for independent dealers, and obviously bureaus and compliance. So really understanding credit history to offer individualized payment offerings and financing for customers. The third one, most of the EMs are very familiar with CRM systems, internet lead management systems, sales enablement. You also have call management that falls under that, and some of the conversational applications, chat, text, and those kind of things. But we also have engagement and opportunity management that we see more and more often. And opportunity management here and engagement are things like, in a very simplified form, equity mining, understanding if end consumers have equity in their vehicles, so potentially you can move them, up into newer vehicles for, similar price or even less. But you also have very advanced engagement solution that offer marketing automations and really create a lot of visibility and transparency, specifically in an online customer journey. So this is all about feeding up the right information at the right time. Right next to shopper engagement, you have service experience, applications that include service online, scheduling, walk around, the write-up, service, marketing, even body shop applications, tire management, and these kind of things. Then at the bottom here on the left side, vehicle life cycle. So you have a lot of applications that support dealers on not just stocking and pricing inventory, but kind of going through appraisal, trade-ins, reconditioning. Specifically on the merchandising, we see more and more applications that provide features and functionality about really marketing or media-rich experience online, 360 pictures, video for inventory, these kind of things. We also have a lot of data that sits into this in this bucket in terms of VIN decode, VIN explosion, trim level, automated descriptions for specific makes and models, and then even registration and titling. Another one that a lot of dealers and even OEMs are excited about is this whole aspect of mobility economy. So the boundaries between those categories here are somewhat fluent. For a very long time, car dealers are familiar with, vehicle key systems and asset management. They're familiar with rental applications and loan applications, to a certain degree, even with fleet. But that is very fluid in the sense of that everything that tracks vehicles, that feeds connected driving, telematics, is now feeding into this new mobility, right? And we have new use cases, specifically with COVID, that are around zero contact sales and service, pickup and delivery, even on an auction perspective and wholesale side of things, right? Shipping vehicles, fleet management with an EV perspective. So this is a very exciting field right now. Besides that, you have parts optimization, and not just from an e-commerce perspective and wholesale, but also just parts management, parts catalog, parts tracking, and these kind of things. And then the last bucket, really from my perspective, is this whole aspect of digital operations, including the DMS that feeds all or most, if not all, of these applications with transactional data around inventory and vehicles, around customers, and other things. But you also have human capital management, you have DDM, dealership document management, business intelligence applications, and others. So this is, in general, a very busy and a very fragmented market. I'll try to break this down a little further here for you into an easier overview. But I would love to hear from your perspective also what applications and what value pools have the highest interest, highest importance for you. So if there are some questions, I think this would be a good moment as well, just to push the pause button and see if you have some questions from your side and some feedback.
And we also have a poll that's tailored to that question that Stefan just posed, in terms of what are the areas that you as an OEM think you need access to or would like to have access to have better insight into the consumer experience. So I will go ahead and launch that.
Okay, so can everybody see that? So interesting. I mean, look, obviously none of us are walking around the halls of NADA this week or next week, I should say. like we have done in the past. So hopefully, you know, Stefan's description here and the notion that there are 800 plus of these vendors, and I should say in North America alone, is no surprise. I mean, it is a very, very fragmented and rich market, for innovation. So CRM and lead management, I can't say, you know, 71% on both of those. I'm not sure that that's a great surprise. I think for many, if not really all OEMs, there's been a good amount of integration that's occurred there, specifically with lead management processes. I think CRM, that changes. Service portal, I know, you know, we're seeing some different things coming along in terms of appointment booking. It's a topic we've talked to some folks about recently. So, you know, that would play into the CRM and the service portal piece. And vehicle inventory management, that's right up there as well. So, but DMS is still the winner. So, you know, this is pretty consistent with what we would expect or hope to see. I know that for many OEMs, you know, moving beyond the DMS is still very much a work in process, and folks are at the beginning of their journey, and hopefully this gives some ideas and some food for thought as you do start that journey.
Yeah, this is great. This is pretty much in line with what I would have expected. You know, naturally, I think the strength of OEMs is really mapping customer experience. So, you know, dealers are very much caught in day-to-day operations. So many of them, from my perspective, struggle with, you know, how to position themselves in a strategic perspective and in the long run. And therefore, you know, desired potentially or map desired a customer experience. So there's a lot of value that OEMs can bring to the table and really visualize customer experience, customer journey. So that's why I'm not surprised that CRM, lead management, service portal or digital retail, everything that circles around customer experience is so high up. Naturally, you know, the DMS is that nucleus that sits in the middle, bringing all those pieces together and really housing transactional data and feeding those systems with additional things. What will be interesting from my perspective is really how these solutions evolve over the next 5 to 10 years. Because even if you look back at CRM, you know, 5 years ago is very different than what it is today. And a lot of what I see in the conversations that I have with software providers already goes into omni-retail environment, where you have to meet the customer where they want to be met, right? Either online, in store, via video, telephony, or two-way conferencing and these kind of things. So that feeds then also into this whole aspect of digital retail and online sales. What is more interesting even there, not just the application side of things, but also the process side of things, right? Because what we see here as a success factor for technology always comes back to having the right people and the right process in place. And if you miss that whole aspect of process, then it's really tough to make technology sticky and really make technology successful. So therefore, it will be interesting to how processes in a dealership will change over the next 5 years. You know, just simply think of digital retail. A lot of digital retail decisions actually have to do with operational questions on the dealership level. Will I follow a Spark approach, a single point of contact? Where there is one sales associate that guides a customer through the entire journey, from needs and wants analysis, payment calculation, credit application, trade-in, F&I menu presentation, vehicle presentation, all the way down to delivery. And that feeds into what people and skills do you need, that will feed into commissions and payment, that will feed into many, many other aspects of things. So that's why I think this is very, very interesting moving forward. Now, naturally, what we had said here earlier is that these layered applications are very important, not just for DMS providers to grow, but for the industry overall, because innovation really happens on the fringes, if you really think about that, right? So what I do is not just on a regular basis talk to franchise car dealers and helping them navigate through their dealership technology choices and selection, but also have a dialogue with software providers and really help them better understand the market, growth opportunities, and these kind of things. So I'm very vocal and very much involved in my conversations there. And I used my access to those software providers recently to start a survey among software providers to really mainly better understand what would hold us back in terms of better sharing information, because ultimately we're all interested in providing a frictionless, a better customer experience. And that frictionless customer experience requires specifically software providers to have much better handovers of data, right? Not just between the DMS and some of those bolt-ons, but even between those bolt-ons and between potentially OEMs. So I asked software providers how they feel about the state of data integration. And I thought it would be interesting for you from an OEM perspective as well to see some of those results. Yeah.
Stefan, yeah, just before you move off that slide, just for 1 second, I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch you fast enough. I just want to make one quick point before we move to that, and make sure everybody saw this orange $18 billion number here in the corner. I mean, that's not lost on me, and the fact that our poll actually, one of the inhibitors that I think kind of won the vote was budget. And so, we have a very, very rich and very large, auto tech space here, and it's only getting larger. And and perhaps another topic even for for part of this series might even be about how the level of investment that's coming into the market. And so I point this out simply because I think that the trick and the challenge for many of you guys on the phone is going to be how to build strategies that enable you to kind of leverage that market in a way that helps you maximize the budget, because competing with them is going to be expensive, but partnering and finding ways to work with them is likely going to be more the way to go, especially in a world where everybody, all of us have limited budgets of some shape or another. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Yeah, Kim, that is actually that was perfect. That was great. So from my perspective, it is not unlikely that number is even higher. So $18 billion is really from Frost and Sullivan, a global perspective on auto IT retail. And I think what's interesting on that number as well is that, again, we talked earlier, a franchise car dealer in the US on average spends per month $30,000 on IT, right? So per year, that is $360,000 for DMS, for CRMs, for many of the bolt-ons that we saw before. And I know from an OEM perspective that has to rethink use cases and data integrations and telematics and vehicle information and monetization in general. Maybe there's some interest as well to monetize on dealership technology. Not necessarily that the dealership body would appreciate those things, right? But there's certain different levels of how OEMs can get involved into this market for auto IT and retail IT. So no, that was great, Kim. Really appreciate that.
Stefan, we had a question come in too. Do you know what the figure is for the US only, not the global number for spend?
So I know that number obviously for DMS is already over $1 billion. So therefore, with all the additional applications, we are probably looking at something that is, potentially close, if not more than $5 billion in the US by itself. I mean, US and Canada.
Okay, so back to what you were saying, Stefan.
Good. Okay, so I asked dealership service providers how they feel about integrations. Integrations with other dealership service providers, specifically DMS providers, and integrations even with OEMs. So the survey, again, really tried to better understand what are some of the roadblocks, what is holding us back in really sharing data more openly. And I brought feedback on 3 questions because I thought that was interesting. And the way I asked those questions is really, I put statements together and I asked participants in the survey to either agree or disagree with those statements. And on the 3 questions that I asked here, I asked those questions twice. I asked them how they feel about that with regards to integrating with other dealership service providers, specifically, or dealership management systems. And I asked them the same question with regards to integrating with OEMs. So what that means, for example, is I asked dealership service providers, with regards to a statement of, we are satisfied with the number of integration partners for our data integration program. So integration partners here, either OEMs or integration partners for DSP. And you can see the feedback below. Everything that is purple is with regards to OEMs. Everything that is pink is with regards to other service providers. So what that means, for example, is that service providers or software providers said that 40% disagree that they are satisfied with the amount of OEM partners that you have, indicating that software providers would likely like to have more OEM partners in their program. And you see in general that between OEM and DSP, the feedback is very close, right? In terms of disagreeing with a statement or agreeing with that. So first question about just the quantity, the number of partners that you have. The second question was really more about the depth of integrations, right? So the number of predefined integration points, PIPs, that you require in terms of vehicle information, data points around customers, data points around sales, data points around who knows what. And that number of disagreement is growing, right? So you have even more OEMs or more dealership service providers that disagree with, we are satisfied with the depth of OEM or DSP interface points per partner, indicating that dealership software providers would probably like to have more access and deeper access to your database or to your data mart, potentially to create use cases that are non-existing today. Besides those 2 first questions, the last question is really more about commitment. So I asked dealership service providers if they are basically happy and satisfied with the commitment that they receive either from OEMs or other service providers in working on those integration programs. And what is somewhat interesting here is that you really see for the first time that those 2 things are apart in terms of feedback for service providers like DMS providers and feedback for OEMs providers. So 50% of those dealership software providers I talked to disagreed with the statement and basically indicating they are not really happy with the commitment that they're receiving from OEMs on working on those integration programs. Commitment is fairly broad, right? That can be anything. That can be in terms of responsiveness, that can be in terms of the amount of information received. But I think it's somewhat interesting to really see that feedback from software providers, specifically also when we talked earlier about what is the perspective from an OEM side of things, and really looking at usually we struggle with commitment or with budget on the software side of things. Kim, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I always wonder about the neither agree nor disagree, whether they are just otherwise exhausted about the whole prospect. But yeah, I mean, really, really interesting results. I mean, there were other good takeaways that came from the survey that again, perhaps we can share in future. But we talked about Stefan, I think technology, resources, things that I think many of you are keenly aware of, right? Roadmap and planning and providing visibility into what your plans are to really partner with these companies. But yeah, I think no other comments.
So we want to kind of flip and get your opinion vis-a-vis the DMS and ask specifically whether you think that the DMS will become less important as a data source. And formatted the same way. This is just state your agreement or disagreement. For some of you that joined a little bit later, I did state in the beginning, all of these answers are anonymous. So please give your honesty, and we'll just give it a minute here for you to respond, and then we'll share the results. Okay.
Whoa, we're split right down the middle. Well, no, I'm sorry, no, we're not. Completely disagree or somewhat disagree. So 86% of us disagree that the DMS will become less important. So clearly, I mean, we all have a long history here, you know, with making sure I'm not getting my double negatives messed up here. The DMS will become less important, and we are disagreeing with that. So 86%. So look, that we have, all of us have a long history with the DMS systems and integration. And that's not going anywhere. And certainly, you know, the discussion this morning is not intended to suggest that. But what we do hope that you can take away from this is that it's not necessarily going to be sufficient in the go forward world that we're moving towards. And I think, you know, we feel that acutely. In our business, we hear that every day in our discussions with both DMS providers and all of the 800 other dealer tech companies that are out there, and we hear this in our discussions with each of you as well. So I'd say 86% fairly emphatic agreement and consistency there.
Yeah, this is certainly a discussion where I feel OEMs are a little bit better equipped than retailers, right? Because retailers really, when you look at the DMS system and you look at their business model, that there's a lot of data, specifically on an online perspective, that cannot be processed really within a DMS. So naturally, there are some discussions already around how can dealers create potentially secondary databases or data marts to process Google Analytics, to process metadata that comes out of digital retail applications and others, because you cannot really process that information, even interface those things with the DMS. So therefore, that is interesting, the feedback from my perspective here, from an OEM perspective, because again, we are hitting a limit there. And maybe that's also, one of the reasons why many of the DMS are trying to recode their applications and really move to next generation and extend their set of data points to support those new use cases there.
And for sure, the dealers are a piece of this. I think there's a question or a comment come through about the reluctance of dealerships to change, and we all have seen that and experienced that. And frankly, I was thinking about this when Stefan was talking earlier about the recoding efforts. In the 20 years that I've been involved in this space, I've seen companies come and go who have tried to enter the DMS space, and in some cases spent millions and millions of dollars doing it. And yet here we are in 2021 or 2020 when Techion effectively is the first to really launch in that entire period. Autosoft, Dominion, are established companies, so a little bit of a different approach. So for sure, the dealers are a piece of this. Historically, they've been very reluctant to change, to think differently. And Stefan, you're closer to this than we are. But COVID, I think, has given us all a nudge. Adversity is a great driver for innovation, and I think, frankly, that's beginning to change and beginning to break down.
I agree. Yeah. So in terms of use cases, if we look at zero contact sales and service, if you look at pickup and delivery, if you look at just online experience, there are so many things that will come out of COVID that will definitely stick. As someone who works very closely with franchise dealer body, naturally I'm somewhat of a dealer advocate. So sometimes I wished there would be more portals or more formats like this to bring OEMs and bring dealers and bring software providers together and really have more of an open dialogue without conflict of interest, and really mapping out how the future customer experience can look like on the sales side and the service side, and really how technology can enable those experiences. So yeah, I think that's it, really it from my perspective here.
Thank you, everybody. I mean, thank you for joining us. I hope everyone has found this helpful. And as Natalie said, please give us feedback, what you liked, what you didn't like, what you'd like to see more of, less of. And thanks again, Stefan, to you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Please stay well and talk to you soon.